This video will show you how to make a graph using UGCloud. First, sign in and go to your drive. Click on New and make a new Google Sheet. That'll give you a spreadsheet program where you're going to recreate your observation table. It's helpful to put the titles on as well, because then the graph can pick up the information for your legend. Once you have your data inputted in, you're going to highlight everything and you're going to go Insert, then Chart. Now your graph might not look like this right away. It depends on how many times you've made a graph with Google before. So to make sure you get the right one, click on Chart Types, and then you have a choice of doing a line, an area, your different kinds of graphs. We want to make a line graph, and I know I'm asking for a smooth curve through it, but be careful. Sometimes if you put a smooth curve through your data points, you'll get a hump at the top of your line here that's not accurate. So if that happens, just go with a straight connect the dots line graph. Sometimes your graph might look like this. When you first open up the wizard, that's because this column here, the use column A as labels, didn't check off automatically. So to fix your graph, just make sure that's clicked on. Now what we can do is we can customize the look of our graph. You want to start by adding a descriptive chart title. Now, having the graph title of temperature versus time, that's so grade 9. This has got to be a really descriptive title that if the graph becomes detached from your lab report, I understand what the graph is showing without any other background information. So a half decent title would be temperature changes while reacting magnesium oxide and magnesium with 1.0 mole per liter HCl. You notice because we've had our titles in our observation table, the legend has automatically popped up here for us. Now we've got to make sure we have all of our titles correctly on our axis. Here we've got an axis with a drop-down box, so this controls the horizontal axis, so the time side. So we want to make sure we have our units on here. And you notice here the scale is kind of a little strange, so we can go down here and change the scale by just flipping at how many grid lines that we have. The major grid lines are how many lines you see here. It's set for 5, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we just flip that to auto, we've got some more. You know what? If we go down to 10, because we've got 10 readings here, that'll show us in 30-second intervals. Okay, great. We don't need any minor grid lines on this one because the estimation that we're going to make from our graph is going to be up and down, not left to right. So we should be okay with just those number of grid lines. Now let's do the other axis. So we flip this to the left vertical, and that gives us our temperature scale. And that's going to be in Celsius. And you notice our scale goes in increments of 15, but we can change that. If we want to go all the way up to Our highest reading is 46 something on our data. We'll go all the way to 50. So if we do 6 lines, including the 0, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That gives us major grid lines every 10 degrees Celsius. And because we're going to be showing the change in temperature on here, we want to have some more grid lines in here, so we'll add some minor ones. Notice I have an increment of 10 in here, so I want 9 small lines showing each degree. So if I just type in 9, on my y-axis I'll have a line for every degree Celsius. Okay, so you want to add enough grid lines so that you can make a good estimation if you're just looking at the graph of what the delta t is, and you want to make it look like graph paper. Okay. And if we scroll down here, notice on our graph we've got this giant space here because our axis starts at 0. We can change that by putting in a boundary here. So if we just type in what our minimum value wants to be, so our lowest value is 20, so if we start at 18, then that's just going to expand our graph out and make it easier for us to read the grid lines. Okay. Now, if we scroll down some more, under the series menu, this is where we can add in our data points. Notice that we just have a straight line here showing. So if you go to point size, and I usually find 4 points is pretty good. It's not too big, it's not too small. And that looks like a half decent graph. So what we'll do is we'll hit Insert, and we have our basic graph made here. And we can move it around, we can make it larger, smaller, things like that. Okay. Now our graph isn't quite finished. The instructions ask you to use tangent lines to show each of the change in temperature values. Now what you can do is, that part is a little tricky to do on the computer. If you want to print your graph out and draw the tangent lines by hand, I'm okay and I'm comfortable with that. But I'll go ahead and show you how to do that on the computer if you want to play around and do it computer-wise. What you can do actually is if you click on your graph so that it's selected, and you can go edit and you can copy your graph and then paste it into a Google Doc. So we go back into my drive and do New and Google Doc. Then what you can do is you can insert it straight into your lab report. So as you're typing along and you're doing your intro and things like that, when you get to your observations, what you can do is paste it in and it'll show up right into your lab report. Okay, it's so that your graph doesn't have to be on a separate, printed on a separate page. Okay, this also allows you to add your figure title, which we'll do in a little bit. Okay, so if you're doing that, your figure title is going to be figure, and then I'm not sure what number your figure title is going to be. It depends on how many graphics you have in your introduction. So if you have a picture of a calorimeter or something else, that would be figure 1. And then so we'll just put figure question mark here because I'm not sure which figure you're going to be. Now, we already have a graph title on here. The figure title has to be different. So the graph title, remember, tells you what the graph is showing you. The figure title underneath the graph is going to tell us what we're using the graph for. So here it could be something like determining the temperature change in reaction 2 and 3. Okay. This second part here doesn't need to be bold, so that would be an appropriate figure title. So if you want to do your tangent lines by hand, you can stop watching the video now, and just make sure that you don't forget to add them in after you've printed your lab report and before you hand it in.